Good morning and welcome to Morning Scoop for Tuesday, September 14th. This is your daily Buckeye fix. I'm Tom Orr. The Tulsa game is in 4 days. The game against Michigan in 74 days. A little later on today, we'll be talking to Ryan Day, but not any other Ohio State players and coaches. That is pretty unusual. Normally, we get a few players and maybe an assistant coach, but today, just Ryan Day. My guest today is Buckeye Scoop beat reporter Tony Gerdeman. And before we get into the rest of the stuff I wanted to talk to you about, what do you make of that?
It's certainly interesting. And is it a circling of the wagons? Is it Ryan Day wanting to protect his players? Is it simply the OSU SID department not wanting to subject the players to all of the talk that is going to be about the defense and wanting to maybe blame? Hey guys, let's point the finger here. What's going on? Is it just an attempt to avoid all of that? Was it done with Ryan Day's approval? Was it his idea? Or does none of that have anything to do with anything? And will tomorrow be about just Ryan Day addressing the program as a whole and going from there, where that's the important thing right now. We talked after the game about Ohio State focusing on themselves. Is this part of that? Is this Ryan Day focusing on Ohio State and talking about the program at large right now?
Yeah, and one of the things I'm interested to see this week is Wednesday. We're going to get a chance to talk to players, supposedly. So we will get to talk to people later in the week. When we do that on Wednesdays, we're typically on the indoor field at the facility. On that video board, they'll have some message of the week. And a lot of times it's just beat Minnesota, beat Oregon, whatever. But in previous years, especially under Urban Meyer, sometimes there was a message of the week and it was laser focus or something like that. Be a 5 or 4 to 6, A to B, whatever message of the week there was. I'm kind of interested to see what the message of the week is. Maybe it'll just be beat Tulsa. And if it is, that's fine. But I'm interested to see what that message is. That's typically something we hear repeated over and over and over again in those interviews, because that's something that's being drummed into the player's head. So even if we don't see it on the board, we may hear it a lot. So that's something to look forward to on Wednesday. But before we get in there to talk to them, before we talk to Ryan Day today, I want to talk to you about an interesting piece that appeared on BuckeyeScoop.com over the weekend. It was titled "The Day After," and it was a little different from what you typically write after an Ohio State game, but this was a little bit of a different Ohio State game. So why did you decide to write that piece?
Well, one, I stole the title from the 1983 nuclear apocalypse movie, The Day After. That's why the title was The Day After with 2021 in parentheses. So it has, that sort of a vibe. Not that there's a nuclear, emergency going on at Ohio State right now, but in terms of in football terms, it's pretty darn close. And so just wanted to discuss what's next. It's the day after. So what does Ohio State do now? And what do they do about their defense? Because at this point, it's clear there is a problem. This is now 4 straight games of giving up 400 yards of total offense to an opponent. The last defensive coordinator to do that at Ohio State was Greg Schiano, and those were his last 4 games as Ohio State's defensive coordinator. So you look at, and Ryan Day didn't keep Greg Schiano, and now Ohio State's giving up more points in those last 4 games than Greg Schiano did. But really, just at this point, as I wrote in a piece, it's not rock bottom, but it's close, and you can see bottom from here in terms of this defense, and it needs to be addressed, and not just be addressed by being addressed. Like, you can't just, let's just talk this out. Like, something needs to change, whether it's, as Ryan Day said, it's personnel or coaching or the scheme. Like, something has to be fixed. Something needs fixed. Something needs to be changed, and you need to do it. And we can talk about it. We can plan it. We can think about it. But at some point, you have to do it. And that's really the gist of it. Now now you have to do something about it. Do I know? No. But am I making $7 million a year to know? No. If I was, I'm not saying I would know. I'd have a better idea.
You'd feel obligated to have an answer, whether you had an answer or not. I feel like at that point, in that piece, you made an analogy to a car you used to have. I thought that was a really interesting analogy. The car started having some problems, So can you briefly share that story and why Saturday's game kind of brought that to mind for you?
Yeah, it was my last car was a 2007 Ford Fusion, and after I don't know how many years, whether it was like 7 or 8 or 9 years, probably maybe not that long, I started to hear there's a, a squeaking, a squealing of the serpentine belt, but it wasn't super bad. It would go away after the car was warmed up. And then after a few months, it stopped going away, but the car was still running fine, no issues. And honestly, I probably didn't do anything about it for at least a year because things were running fine. And then one day I'm in some Columbus neighborhood and my car dies and the battery dies. And it's like, well, of course, the belt has now snapped and it's no good. So, I got stranded, I got towed. Then a few years later, it starts to happen again. So at that point, I know what's going on. I know I need to address this and do it quicker than I did last time, or because I knew the same outcome was what would eventually happen. I'm going to get stranded somewhere. So rather than that happening, I thought, let's just deal with this. Let's address it. Address it. I didn't actually, before I could even address it, within a couple of weeks, it snapped. Fortunately, I was in my driveway when all of this happened. But knowing that it's kind of like the doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. You've gone through this. Ryan Day has gone through this with the defense last year. You saw Urban Meyer go through it with Greg Schiano. And if you just continue to go through it again this year without changing anything, you're going to get, as I said, I think in the last line of the piece, you're going to get stranded again at some point. Maybe like, I don't know, a Duke's Mayo Bowl or something like that.
Yeah, it feels like the defense has been driving with the check on engine light on for a couple of years now, and maybe they've addressed it by putting a piece of tape over the check engine light. Now I can't see it anymore, so now it's not a problem. And that's one side of it, but on the other side, here's some general life advice. Going into a situation saying, "Well, we have to do something," that's generally a great way to end up doing something incredibly stupid and impulsive. That's true in politics, work, day-to-day life. Write that down. That's good advice. Don't do that. So you kind of have to be deliberate about it. But, one thing that has sort of struck me, and I think come up with in other people's thoughts on this as well, is the one high defense that Ryan Day has basically insisted on since he took over in 2019 has just it has not worked in the last couple of years. It was great in 2019. And then Jeff Hafley left and Chase Young left and Jeff Okudah left and Damon Arnett left and Jordan Fuller left. And all of a sudden, and now it's been somewhere between bad and the day after. So it seems to me like the first step here is figuring out what is the cause of the issue, because you can't run a scientific experiment where you bring Jeff Hafley back for a year and see if that fixes it, or if you bring Chase Young back but you don't have Jeff Hafley, does that fix it? So you can't do that. I don't know how you identify, is it the players, is it the coaching, is it fixable in that way? And if it's not, then I'm with you. I think you have to change the scheme at that point, because otherwise you're going to waste this season if you don't make some kind of a change.
Yeah, and I've gone on record saying that Jeff Hafley wasn't going to save that defense last year either, because they didn't have the players for it, and we were touting Jordan Fuller for a long time, and everybody saw that last year when they didn't have him. And so I just don't think, while Ryan Day says there is talent here, I agree there is talent, but you need specific talent for the single high and the way they want to do it. But as Ross Fulton has told you and told others, there are ways to disguise the single high to make things a little bit less easy on the offense. And I think there's several issues going on there where it's not necessarily the talent to run it, the kind of talent. Maybe it's better suited for two safeties, two high safeties or cover two or whatever you want to do, but just the way they're doing it doesn't match their personnel. And then also they're not putting their personnel in the best positions to succeed, because they are making the offense aware of where they're going to be before the snap. And so much of football right now is pre-snap, where quarterback looks over to the coach tells them where to go, and then they snap the ball and that's where the player goes. And if all of that is known beforehand, then you're putting your defense in a situation where they will look bad. And then you start to, well, what is the problem? Is it the scheme? Is it the players? Is it the coaching? And it's all of it for different reasons and the same reasons.
What's interesting is, as you're saying that, I'm thinking back to 2018 and that Greg Schiano defense you mentioned before. And in 2018, the criticism was like, this is way too complicated. Like you look at the linebackers out there and they're like very clearly trying to do like quantum equations in their head, trying to calculate where they're supposed to be with, these 17 different variables that they're supposed to be considering. And then this year, it's like, now it's too simple. I mean, there has to be a middle ground in there somewhere. But, one other thing that they have in common with the 2018 defense is how unresponsive the defense was to issues. It seemed like there was like schematic stuff that just never seemed to get better on Saturday in a way that took me back to like that 2018 Maryland game where there was like that same misdirection play. And I think Ty Johnson's like still running somewhere in Maryland, just gashing them multiple times. If you decide coaching is the issue and I don't know if that's a coaching issue or a scheme issue or both maybe, but I think there's a real question how much you can do about a coaching issue right now. I mean, maybe you move Kerry Coombs up to the box and that seems like that's almost the bare minimum that has to happen this week. But it feels like a more drastic change in staffing is probably hard to implement mid-season. But on the other hand, if you were going to make a major switch in scheme or coaching or whatever it is, this is the time to do it because you're about to start a 5-week stretch where you have Tulsa, Akron, Rutgers, Maryland, and then an off week before you kind of hit the deep end of the pool with at Indiana and Penn State. So if you're going to do it, this would be when you do it. So what are you expecting to do? Like, I mean, is it some kind of big change in scheme or personnel, minor tweaks? Like what are you expecting?
That's a great question. And honestly, I wouldn't be surprised by almost anything at this point. I guess what I would expect is for Day, who said after the game that he will have the answers on during the week, whether it be Tuesday or Wednesday, as to what the issues were, whether it's personnel, whether it's coaching, whether it's scheme, and then they would go from there. Just watching it, it sure seems like there were players not playing where they were supposed to, or not able to get where they needed to be, or not recognizing the crackback blocks and the cornerbacks filling the spots vacated by the linebackers and things like that maybe they should have been doing that they weren't. And so I won't be surprised if it's, well, the players have been coached up. They now know what they need to do. It has been reassured to them, and we're just going to keep on. And to me, that's almost like doing nothing through all of this, because it's not just that one issue that has held this defense back, and it's many others. And so I think I'm with you. You maybe letting Kerry Coombs see the field from above will help. Maybe somebody else calling the defense will help. Is this now the right time to do it? 2 games is not a lot, but also it's not really just 2 games. It's last year as well that I think is part of this accounting. And now if you're going to, you've got Tulsa, Akron, Rutgers. Now, if you're, as you said, now is the time to make the change. But honestly, I think the betting favorite is probably something along the lines of, yeah, we saw some errors. The players have been coached up on it. We're ready to move forward.
I don't know what to think about that, because I don't think you can really put it on the players, because I mean, this is going to be a sort of strange analogy because it's cross sports and a very different age bracket and a very different level. But I coach my daughter's softball team, and I coached our town's all-star team this summer. So we play in this tournament, and we play a team that's doing like delayed steals, and our kids have never seen delayed steals because no one in our league did that. So kind of on the fly, I have to go, okay, this has happened now. So I call timeout and I explain, gather the infielders around and say, okay, here's what this is going on. Here's how you fix it. And, if we get someone in a rundown, hey, the first baseman's got to come down the line and cover home plate because we got to have someone else at home plate, and the first baseman's not going to have a play. And you explain it to them and they can do it. It feels like if you're telling linebackers, hey, if there's a crack back block, hey, the safety's got to rotate over there, or like if a bunch of like 10-year-old girls can figure it out in softball, like it feels like college football players, that makes me think it may not be a player issue. That may be a lack of recognition issue. I mean, again, like these are very different things, but it seems like you're not going to have the same issue 3 times in a row in a game. That seems unlikely to me.
Well, and that particular thing, it's just really hard to do that with the man coverage, because they're not as spread out as they would be in zone, and they don't see things happening in front of them as they would in zone. So stuff like that is what I'm talking about in terms of putting players in difficult situations. So would the best answer then be to, well, we are still a single high defense, but they could do multiple things from that, and they can be too high at any point as well because they have that bullet. I just think they won't go away from that, but they won't be so rigid with it. And at this point, I'm expecting very little change in terms of the procedure. But given the difficulties with this defense and the sheer fact that they're giving up almost 35 points a game, at this point, you can't, like, you shouldn't be shocked if somebody is like, okay, Kerry Coombs is gone, or we have to make a major change, because this is completely unacceptable. Michigan has given up 24 points this season. Ohio State's given up 24 points and a half twice or something like that. And if Wisconsin can do it, if Iowa can do it, if Indiana can do it, like if all of these programs can do it, as I've said for many years about offense, bad offense is a choice. I don't think bad defense is necessarily a choice, but bad defense with the best talent in the conference is a choice.
Yeah, that's the thing. You look at some of the defenses that are playing lights out, and like Iowa has this like world-beating defense, and you look at the players that Iowa's getting to run that world-beating defense, and they're people that Ohio State might have invited to camp maybe, but how many players in the Iowa defense had an Ohio State offer? Probably not more than one or two without going back and looking. This is such a fascinating week to me, because this is the first time we're seeing Ryan Day have to be the head coach the week after a loss. I mean, it sounds crazy because he's been a head coach for 3 years now, but he's only had 2 losses before this, and they were both season-ending losses. So he's never had to do the press conference the Tuesday after the loss. He's never had to say, okay, and now we circle the wagons in this way, and here's how we move forward, and we don't let one loss turn into 2 losses or, to kind of spiral the season down the drain. This feels to me like a week we're going to learn an awful lot about Ryan Day as both a coach and a leader.
Especially if there's a major change, then you realize, okay, enough is enough. He isn't going to put up with it. We've seen him be patient, and at this point, that's how I know him. He's a patient guy, so that's what I'm going to assume he's going to be moving forward, until he shows me that he's not. And how does he do that? It has to be a major change. And it can't just be, well, we've coached him up. We've got it. We're going to do some different things. Doesn't there has to be something structurally different to convince you that something has changed?
Yeah. I mean, I think to me, the absolute bare minimum change is Kerry Coombs goes upstairs, because that at least eliminates one variable of, maybe things are, I got to tell you, I have someone who is watching games on the sidelines at this point. It is real hard to tell what's going on. And I am not a football mind anywhere close to the level of the Ohio State coaching staff. So I'm sure they're seeing 1,000 things I'm not seeing while I'm down there, but just while you're down there, I mean, they have a great football mind. They don't have X-ray vision. Like, sometimes stuff is happening on the other side of offensive linemen and you can't see it. Like, that is a thing that happens down on the field. There is a reason that when they go review film, they review the all 22 and not the field level film. I mean, that's why you put coordinators in the boxes, because they have the all 22 view up there. If that's what you're reviewing to, judge scheme and make, you got to have that in front of your eyes. You don't need people telling you over the headsets. You got to be able to see it, dissect it, learn from it, adapt, and change a call. And that's like, if a team's running tempo, you got 20 seconds to do that. So you don't have time to stop and think and call timeout and, well, let's reflect on this for a moment. Like, it's next play, next call in, let's go. That I think is the minimum to me, is move him upstairs. And then after that, I didn't expect a major change, but when we got it's only Ryan Day, it was like, I'm still not expecting a major change, but I would no longer be completely shocked if there was some kind of a major change. But yeah, moving Combs upstairs, I think is the minimum. I mean, what if it's something beyond that? What is the most likely, if there is some kind of semi-significant change, not necessarily like major staffing changes, but what to you is the next most likely thing after that?
I've seen people discussing, well, what about Larry Johnson or what about this? I think maybe the most likely thing for me would be Matt Barnes taking over the play calling, because he's upstairs. He's done it before, and when he was at Maryland, he did it for a bit, so he has some experience there. I think if it was Larry Johnson, you'd have to move him upstairs, and that's really never been what he's done at Ohio State ever. He's always been on the field since 2014 when he arrived. So, you know, and I know people are saying, well, what about Paul Rhodes? Let's not forget the defense Paul Rhodes had in his last couple of years in college before he was no longer allowed to coach, before he was fired basically for performance. So while it's great to have his input, I don't know that you turn to him right yet. I think if you do something, it's Matt Barnes, and Ryan Day has really, really likes him, has a lot of faith in him. Barnes and Hafley were together for, shoulder to shoulder for a year. Maybe there's some Hafley rubbing off on him there, but I think if there's a major change, maybe that would be my most likely thought.
Yeah, and this is going to be, that's going to be fascinating to hear from Day what they're planning on doing, to whatever degree he's willing to talk about that with us, and then just sort of see his response and hear, what the message to the team is this week, because this is all new. This is, as Urban Meyer told Brian Day, like, all right, it's a great job. You're never allowed to lose. Go get him, Tiger. Like, well, this is a go get him, Tiger week, because you just lost one, and you can, all of your goals are still probably ahead of you. You can still do pretty much whatever you want to, but you just used up your margin for error. So go get them, Tiger. So that'll be Tiger will start going to get them today, and we will be talking to him later on today. We'll be streaming that live at youtube.com/Buckeye Scoop. I'm sure we will have a Buckeye Weekly episode to look back at that and discuss that a little later on. We'll either do a Buckeye Weekly or a Morning Scoop episode talking about that after we're done talking to Ryan Day. And then Wednesday, I guess we're talking to assistant coaches and players, and we'll see what they have to say. And then a suddenly very, very, very interesting Tulsa game is on Saturday. So what a fascinating this week is shaping up to be at BuckeyeScoop.com. We'll have Ross Fulton on the Morning Scoop a little later on this week to give you a little more detailed X's and O's on what he saw, what he thinks, and what he thinks is next for the defense and the offense, because there's stuff to talk about on both sides of the ball. So we'll have those shows coming up a little later on in the week, but it should be Ross has a piece going up, I think, later today at BuckeyeScoop.com. I've gotten a sneak preview of it. It is fantastic. And you can read that at BuckeyeScoop.com. And if you remember, you get access to Ross's Q&As on the board, on our Ask the Insiders board. Lots of really good insight and analysis from our team. You can sign up today at BuckeyeScoop.com. Also, if you are watching on YouTube, hit the little bell there, and then you get notified when we start doing live streams of Ryan Day's press conference, if we do live podcasts, if we do pregame shows, postgame shows on Saturday, all that kind of wonderful stuff. You can be there for that. And then a week from now, you can be there for our postgame show at 1:30 in the morning after the Akron game. Tony, of all the postgame shows I've ever been excited for, that's the one I think I'm most excited for. I can't wait. Can't wait to pull the third shift Akron postgame show. Hope you guys are able to join us. It should be a doozy. That'll do it for today. Thank you guys for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.